JS, the stage is yours.
Cool. Good morning. Right, I'm Rob Ashton, and I'm going to talk about web stuff, whatever. It is a 101 talk. Well, I say 101, it's softish. I don't really know what you expected. I couldn't give a really hardcore technical talk today because I'm really hungover. So I'm playing it easy. If you want to talk like hardcore tech stuff, then come out later with me for beers and we'll do it there. That's how we'll roll. So anyway, obviously in this talk I'm going to represent my enterprise experiences. Anyone here work for an ex-Silverlight company or a current Silverlight company? I'm so glad there's no hands in the room. That's awesome. Has anybody ever worked for a Silverlight company? Oh, come on. All my jokes are going to be completely lost on you. That's not cool. That's not cool at all. What do you use then? Flash? Or have you all just been like 10 years ahead of everyone else using JavaScript still? Really? The last like 10 years? No, okay, fair enough. Well, anyway, I worked for a really large company about 3 years ago, and this was genuinely something that was said in a meeting with a bunch of people. We looked at hiring Miguel to come along and create Silverlight for the iPad because they didn't want to do anything in JavaScript. This was, 3.5 years ago now. For those that don't know, Miguel is the coordinator of the Mono project. And they were actually looking at taking over the entire Mono team and getting them to focus on Silverlight for the iPad. And they had the money for it as well. What stopped them was people saying it was a really bad idea, not the fact it was going to cost a pile of money. So this is the kind of company that I've been dealing with. They have requirements, and they'll build those towards those requirements and try and build stuff any way they can see how. They also contacted me and went, didn't you write a Silverlight JavaScript compiler, Rob? Could we use that? I actually did create that, but it was more for a bet than for actual real use. So I actually did create a compiler which would take HTML, convert that to XAML, say the other way around, XAML to HTML, and then transpile the .NET IL to JavaScript and map it onto the JavaScript that would execute off the HTML. And it was good for really simple applications like calculators and to impress all the other developers with how clever I was. But as an actual thing, it was an awful idea. Nonetheless, I decided to join them and give them a hand. So this is me. I create crap games, really awful games in JavaScript. That's my background. I've done this for half a decade now. Before then, I wrote them in C. But I do write lots of crappy games. And quite a lot of the experience that I've got in writing games in JavaScript are incredibly valid when writing visualizing tools in JavaScript as well. Does anybody want to see my games? Yeah, is that time of day already? Okay, because otherwise I'll be at the end of the talk when I run out, when I've clearly got too much time left and I've overshot or undershot or whatever. Let's have a look at the kind of games that I build, because I've got them on my hard drive after all. There's a command line. There's this folder. All right, let's look at this one here. Has anyone seen this before? Anyone follow me on Twitter and see my amazing things? This is something called Hover Battles. It's in WebGL. My name is obviously Rob. If you knew my IP address, you could join in right now, and you could join in me and blow some bots up. I'm going to win. I'm going to win. Look at that. Kick ass. All right. So anyway, I create crap games. This is multiplayer. All written in JavaScript, WebGL, and all other stuff. And there's some bots in there, and it's kind of sucky, really. So anyway, I know about high-performance JavaScript. Clearly, it's quite pretty, and it works, and hopefully that gives me some kind of credibility. These bots are really awful. They haven't killed me once yet. I'm sitting really still. I'm not a good AI programmer. That's for sure. All right, so there's one really crap game. What else can we look at? Ooh, yeah, I know just whatever. We could look at. All right, that was a WebGL game. We could run that one. Hit refresh. This is an awesome. Careful now. That was not a demo fail. That was just a 404. Which is a perfectly fine thing to do. Anyone ever play Centipede on the old Amiga? Yeah, all right. This is Centipede where you're the Centipede and you have to dodge the bullets. So it was for Live and Dare about two years ago. There's actually sound effects and everything, but you can't actually hear them because, yeah, whatever. Anyway, boring crap. This is Canvas. So I write lots of these. I've got like half a dozen of the damn things on GitHub. It's either 3D or 2D. Wow, those sound effects are really quite real. Okay, anyway, we'll ignore that. So I do competitions and things like that, and oddly enough, I've never won. but lots of experience writing games. Excellent. We're not really going to talk about games in this talk. We're only going to talk about the glorious times spending enterprise JavaScript for charts and things, but whatever. Anyway, this company goes, well, if you've done all those things and whatever, we can clearly do all of our charting in JavaScript, and you can be the person to do that. So there's a total face palm there, because it was not something I really wanted to ever do in my life. Because one of the challenges is that product owners, they want ponies. I'll explain what I mean by that later, but they always want ponies. They're like little school kids. I want a pony for Christmas. And the problem is the Silverlight devs all want to do everything of MVCC. MVC, what? That's multi-version concurrency control. That's not the one I wanted at all. I wanted MVVC. Never mind, whatever. We'll pretend the acronym's not wrong, and move on from there. They want shiny framework and coffee. So as an example, the developers at this company had a very large Silverlight charting framework, and everything was done by this giant model. You put configuration in that model, it would do some charts in the special way for that company with all the lines in all the right places and all the right gradients and all that other stuff. And it was really quite atrocious because it was just this one giant model doing every single kind of chart in the whole wide world. But the Silverlight devs liked that, and they didn't see why we couldn't do that in HTML and JavaScript world. I'll explain why I can't do that in a second. So when doing web stuff, this is the first argument they all had, and I can't believe even now this was actually an argument that people had when people didn't know what they were meant to be doing. What do you do it in? Do we do it in HTML, SVG, Canvas, WebGL? How do you do it? So the first thing is, can we do it in HTML? Well, everyone understands HTML. It's boring. We know what it does. A lot of people didn't want to do charting in HTML because HTML isn't made for charting. Okay, well, HTML wasn't made for a lot of things, and we still use it. Obviously, there's SVG, which is largely supported across mobile browsers and desktops and whatever. This is quite a well-defined spec. People didn't mind using that, but they went, ooh, XML, we don't like XML, therefore that's not very nice. And of course, there's Canvas, where you get to draw stuff on a pretty thing. Has anybody here used Canvas before? Yeah, all right, you're cool people. I like this audience. No Silverlight developers, lots of JS developers. In fact, you could do the talk for me, couldn't you? So all the developers really like Canvas, and they really like Canvas because you get to do everything yourself by drawing things on a rectangle. Obviously, it's an atrocious idea for many reasons, but we'll cover those shortly. But therein lies the problem. We've got a bunch of really clever developers and a bunch of not so clever developers. The not so clever developers want to use this giant model, and we've got some very clever developers who want to go and create everything from scratch in Canvas. And then we've got people in between arguing for things they don't really know what they actually are. It's not very good. And the thing about all these technologies is they're actually massively different. For example, if you want to do real-time updates in any of these things, it looks very different in each one. So in Canvas, obviously what you do is you have a render loop of some sort. And yes, I know I'm using set interval there and not render loop, blah, blah, blah. I don't care. It's an example. But every time you come out of a loop, you clear the surface and you draw what you want to draw and you change your model. And that's what you do. And that's great. And you can do that at 30 times a second, 60 times a second, or whatever, so long as your CPU or GPU can keep up, depending on how you're doing it. Fantastic. Obviously, you could do the same in HTML SVG, where you have a box and you render it, and you then just, in the render loop, you just change where the box is or move things from the canvas. Whatever. Obviously, you don't do things that way because you do obviously have CSS transitions and SVG transitions and things like that. This microphone's really annoying. So I assume you've all seen this before with CSS animations where you say, I want this thing to go from over here to over here, and all the work gets done by the browser for you. Yes? You're familiar with animations? Well, whatever. I'll assume you are. It's not important anyway, you know. The point is, for something as trivial as moving a box from one side to another is very different depending on the technology you choose. And you get very different performance characteristics depending on the way you do it. And obviously, you've got, not just for that, but you've got your 3D transforms, various easing effects and such. You've got different ways of doing the animations, because you can use keyframes or you can use transitions. And the list kind of goes on in all the different ways you can do all these things. And the company I was in spent about a month arguing about what were all the best ways of using all these things without actually writing any code. Because as described before, they were quite happy to go and spend $1 billion to go and hire them on a team to go and reinvent Silverlight. So that's the kind of company that this was. And obviously, that's quite a cool thing. If you ever played any of these emulators on the internet where you play like a Game Boy or a SNES or whatever in the browser, what they often do is they just actually put the image data directly into the canvas because they can. So they actually make their own buffering system, make their own imaging system, render into a big pile of bytes, and then convert it into image data to put in the canvas like that. And you can do it that way too. This is actually what developers wanted to go and do because they were quite clever, and they thought they could do all the rendering themselves and take over the world. But no, that's not a great idea at all, because we don't want to worry about stuff like that. If you find yourself arguing in the team over whether you want to use HTML or SVG, you've already lost. These arguments are completely meaningless for most people because we have things like this. We've got D3. Any D3 users in this room? Everyone's used D3. We love D3. Yeah. Hail to D3. Yeah, all right. So D3 is supposedly declarative. How one exactly is declarative in JavaScript, I don't really know. You're still calling functions, but whatever. That's a whole other conversation. But the point is, you're able to say, I have some data, and this is the DOM that I want to represent with that data. Please go and do that. Thank you very much. This is what happens when there are new elements. This is what happens when elements disappear. Please do this crazy stuff for me. And that's kind of nice. D3 will target HTML or SVG. Kind of nice. If you want charting, there's Dimple.js, which is built on top of D3. This is my preferred tool at any client these days, just throw some charts up on the wall. Because D3 is not a charting library. D3 is just a data visualization library, and sometimes you just want some goddamn charts. So that's Dimple.js. Cool thing about Dimple.js is it actually exposes D3, so you can do all the cool things you would do in D3 with Dimple, just with all its constructs like what is a bar chart, what is a line chart. It's kind of nice. Obviously, that's not very good for performance. And we do care about performance because we are good developers. So there's React.js and D3. We can use them together. So any React converts in this room yet? Come on, React converts. I should do a React talk instead. I'll get you on my side. Okay. Bet you're all Angular users, aren't you? No? There's no one saying yes. I'm assuming you are. You're just sitting there in shame. No? Yeah, you're all Angular users. Okay. Yeah, fair enough. Throw the rubbish away. Go on. React's where it's at. So React's kind of cool in that if you generate a giant tree of SVG or HTML, they're just elements at the end of the day, it can do a diff and then just modify the actual render tree how it sees fit in the fastest way possible. So that's kind of a nice thing when doing charting and trying to do rapid updates. If you've got a few 100,000 points on a chart and you change 5 of them, you don't want to have to go through the tree yourself to work out which ones need to change color. It's not very cool. So React's kind of nice for that. Yeah, all right. Obviously, if you don't like JS, I hate JS personally. It's a rubbish language. It's for amateurs and teenagers. There you are. I said it. If you're still using JavaScript, still like JavaScript, there's something wrong with your brain. So there's some good morning, and so you can use ClojureScript, which is also a bad language, but at least it's not JavaScript. Yeah, quite. So this is a bit of function to make a simple rectangle in SVG. Its one defining feature is that it's Lisp. Actually, it's not Lisp. I disagree with that because it's got all sorts of crazy races in there, but it's Rich Hickey's version of a Lisp, so we'll let that go. You've got Reagent, Reactify, and a bunch of other really cool libraries built on top of things like React, and you can declaratively describe your entire document in ClojureScript and let things render, and that's super cool as well. For doing games and things like that, obviously there's Impact.js. This is Impact.js. I hate Impact.js, but it's a good example anyway, because it's one of the few things that are actually commercially viable in that world. This is an entity in some kind of crappy game. I didn't write it. And obviously the 3GS. 3GS is a really cool thing that we thought we might think about using when we're doing our charts, because you can actually target Canvas or WebGL or HTML or SVG or whatever. There's render targets for everything. As it happens, having render targets for absolutely everything means it's a really bad abstraction for most things, but never mind. It's a nice idea. As for 3D games, no one's won that yet, which is a bit of a shame. Lots of people have written a 3D game engine for the web in JavaScript, and they're all crap. One day, Unity will come along, and they will release their own, and that'll be great, and everyone will be really happy. Isn't that nice? Anyway, back to ponies, because that was all boring. I was just a list of technologies, which is... I wasn't sure if I could get away with doing demos today or not, because I wasn't sure if I could put the laptop in or not. So I didn't do any demos, which is kind of sad, because now I know I can laptop in. I could show you some really cool things. But yeah, ponies. This is what I mean by ponies. Enterprise product owner comes along and says, I want 1 million interactive points in this chart, and I want it to work on a mobile phone, and I also want a unicorn for Christmas to go with my Ferrari, and oh yeah, I need this next week because I have a demo and I already told them we'd have it. Seriously, it's called ponies. Do you never use this expression in your companies ever? Start using it. When your product owner comes along and asks for something, you say, no, you're asking for ponies. Don't be silly. You're asking for ponies. You're being an petulant child. Don't call your product owner a petulant child unless you're me and get away with it. I didn't get away. I got fired. Anyway, whatever. Don't listen to me. This is called asking for ponies. And the problem is, if you give a child a pony, what happens is they ask for another pony. Because they think that they're going to get ponies for Christmas every year, which is awful. So this is actually a real example, apart from the unicorn and the Ferrari, although I'm sure they had a Ferrari because they were a product owner at this really large company, and they were going to spend £1 billion to get Miguel, what's his face, to come and rewrite Mono for them. So, I'm sure he probably had 5 Ferraris at home, and the pony analogy didn't work on him because he probably did buy his child ponies. But anyway, million interactive points. Well, obviously the answer is no. Get out of here. Don't do say things like that. Nearly always, the fastest way to solve these problems is to change the requirements completely. So, for example, this one, I want to have 1 million interactive points on a chart on my mobile phone. Anyone see the problem with that? I can see the problem with that. Like, what's an interactive point on a mobile phone when you got 1 million points? It's just a sheet of colour. You can't actually click on anything. It's completely useless. What information are you going to get out of this? Absolutely nothing at all. So obviously the solution there is to use something like a heat map or a different kind of chart, and then all the performance problems goes away. So in the massive back and forth we had in this company about what technology to use, what framework to use, what thing to use, it was always a battle between the people saying, well, we can't achieve the performance we need to achieve if we use all these pre-built frameworks, and the people saying, well, if we use the pre-built rendering engines, then we'll do it in 1 week, and we'll just change the requirements so we haven't got to do your crazy things. You have to argue very strongly against the ponies. Now, as it happens, the people arguing in terms of ponies won, and they still haven't shipped a product yet, but they have lots of ponies, which is kind of cool. That's nice. And that was quite interesting in terms of what one might expect from the app anyway, because one of the reasons for the shift to HTML and JavaScript from the Silverlight world was because we wanted to have everything on the iPads and mobile phones and such. And a lot of the concepts available on desktop applications didn't make sense in the mobile world. You don't have necessarily the large screen real estate to pack all this information in. You can't get away with bad design quite so much. So on this shift to let's go and do everything on mobile devices and do everything in HTML, it was a good chance to rethink the kind of applications they were building anyway. Not that they did. Again, they still wanted to rebuild Excel for this in the browser, but whatever. But if you can't understand a visualization on the iPad, you probably can't understand the desktop either. So there you go. And also a performance thing, if it's going to be fast on your phone, it's fast on your laptop as well. So when I'm building all my really crazy ass games, which no one's ever going to play, I always make sure they're going to work on my phone first. So I'm always there on my phone as a tester, making sure things are going to happen. Because I know once I ship it on desktop where people might play it, because people are happy to click links on Facebook and occasionally play a game for 5 seconds before going, that's rubbish, I know it'll work well on their PCs, which is kind of cool. So this is a really important point. What happens when a company comes along and says, we want lots of charts in our application now, we want lots of visualizations or whatever, is that developers go away and say, what we need now is a library for this, and they go away and look at D3 and such, and they start building their own charting library on top of D3, or their own charting library on top of Canvas, or their own charting library on top of WebGL, or whatever, and that's just an awful thing to do. Most people's core business is not charting. Now, this company I was talking about, their core business kind of was charting. So, again, spending $1 billion to go and do this kind of made an awful lot of sense. But, well, actually, no, it still made no sense at all. Actually, it made slightly more sense than it might have done otherwise. But still, it was an awful idea. Same thing goes here. Don't build game engines unless you have a lot of spare time in your hands and you just want to build a game engine, which is kind of cool. We've all done this. We've all built game engines, and they're a remarkably fun thing to do. My little 3D glowy blue thing with explosions, that's my own game engine. I'm very proud of it. But it took me about 5 months to build the game engine and 2 weeks to build the game. So, you know, there's something said there about the cost of my time in doing that. And if that had been a commercial product and that had been the charting library, then we'd have spent a whole lot of money on something that we could have probably achieved with something off the shelf. It would not have been quite so much fun, but you have to balance fun and money sometimes, unless it's your own spare time, at which point, you know, optimize for fun. All for that. That's cool. Obviously, don't build frameworks either. That's an awful idea. They were obsessed at the last 3 companies I was at with building the framework, the common framework that everyone could use to build the charts in a consistent manner. Completely obsessed. And I couldn't understand why. They had style guides, so you had to have. Try and not say the company name there, because I'm trying to keep it private. Company X Blue. They had a special shade of blue that was patented to their company, and a special shade of green. And they always wanted those things to be there, and they wanted them to be enforced in our products, and didn't want developers to ever have a choice in moving away from those palettes. It was this really weird thing where they didn't want the developers to have any control whatsoever because they didn't trust them to do anything. Again, flawed company. If you try and build frameworks to protect developers from themselves or protect developers from the company, then you're working for a really bad company. Get the hell out of there. That's what I did. Obviously, component library is perfectly fine. So there's nothing wrong with making a module for this saying, this is our palette. These are the colors to use in our applications. Please use this palette over here. If you don't use this palette, I might wag my finger at you and say, no, you've been a very bad person. But, you know, building a framework or building large amounts of code to do mobile charting or web charting or visualizations or whatever, unless it's your core business, makes no sense whatsoever. It really does not. And yet everyone still does it. I've been in to consult now at a dozen companies over the last year, I think, and they've all got their own charting engine or their own charting framework. And I just weep at how much money they spent on that. And compared to, hey, there's some stuff over here and you can use it to build some really cool crap. I like building cool crap. So on that note, obviously, you've got NPM, Bower, CommonJS, RequireJS, and all that nonsense. And if you're not using these to manage your code, if you're not using these to manage your modules or to build as usable components, then please start doing that. That'd be quite nice. So I'm ending early here on purpose. I actually wanted to have a Q&A, but there's very few people here, so I'm not really sure if I have one of those or not. That was my entire talk. That was stuff. I had demos and on my other laptop, but I'm not sure I used them or not. Any questions? I have war stories. We can go into them. Lots of war stories.
Hey Rob, thank you for the talk. Question. Do you think that this whole JavaScript on mobile will replace the native way will suddenly take up? Or
It is my strong hope and desire that JavaScript dies a horrible fiery death. And it is my strong desire that's what happens.
I love you for that.
Sorry?
I love you for this statement.
Okay, yeah, good. No, really, it's an awful idea. So, in all this stuff here, the main message really is don't write your own JavaScript to do stuff. Let someone else do the hard work for you, because it is hard work. And what they will do is they'll optimize themselves to make use of the browser's strong code. So the browser's got a big pile of really fast code written in it to do things like hardware rendering, hardware acceleration. In that WebGL game there, most of the rendering was done by the browser. I merely prepared a big pile of buffers for it in the right order, gave them to the browser and went, could you just sort that out, please? And the browser went, yeah, sure, I'll render that how I see fit. That's how HTML has always worked. If you ship a big pile of HTML from the server to the browser can start rendering it before it even gets all the HTML. It's optimized for rendering HTML really, really quickly. Lots of native code has been written to render the stuff really, really quickly. When you start doing JavaScript or whatever, all the work comes in trying to push things either to the browser or keep things inside JavaScript, because jumping between that barrier there is really expensive. It's fundamentally stupid. It's a really bizarre way of doing things, like using a language that's designed to like toggle buttons on or off, to do chart rendering and crap like that. It makes no sense whatsoever. So yeah, I'm hoping that JavaScript will die a horrible death and replace it with something sensible, which actually compile natively and be fast and wonderful and great, and be a good language to boot. I'm now asking for ponies, and I know that's not going to happen. What's actually going to happen is we're all going to count using JavaScript. I'm sorry. Hence why we have to have talks like this. Yeah.
Thank you.
Ask a question, get an answer, you know? No one else want to ask questions. You'll save the beers later. Ludum Dare, I've done 6 now, I think. The last one was really quite awful. I was going to try and... Actually, shall I show my last game? All right, let's do it. What did I call it? It might be called Tiny Protector. I've lost the... I'm not on the internet, people. I'm not on the internet. Let's solve this problem. The only way I know how is connect to the internet. Okay, I'm warning you, my last one was really quite awful. So the thing about Ludum Dare is it's quite interesting as a challenge in a competition, because you have 2 days to build something very, very quickly. And this is where some of my mentality comes from in the whole let's try and get a project out of the way and done with. Because if you only have 2 days to build a game, you don't want to spend the whole 2 days building a game engine. It's an awful idea. Is it called Time Protector or is it not? It is. Look at that glorious HTML, people. It's good. So what happens when making games for Ludum Dare is you make the game first, and then you go, oh crap, I need to give this to people somehow. So you build a website for it, and this is all done the last half hour before deadline. You go, oh god, website. Ah. So look, I've got a drop shadow on the button, and that's kind of cool, you know. So I know, right? Okay, how do I play this game? Oh, blurring, awesome. Oh, that's good. Oh. Okay, so it doesn't quite. Control works. Nope. Okay, so I've never played this on a MacBook before. Somewhere over there, there's some enemies. You can't see them yet because I can't zoom out, because every time I press a zoom out key, the window changes like that. So I wonder why I got really bad votes on my. So it works really well on my Linux machine, and it works really well on my mobile phone. But I should have perhaps checked Mac OS first. Oh, some asteroids. They're coming around. They're spinning around a gravity field and stuff. So yeah, I lost that one pretty badly. I do wonder what... Oh no, I'm going to die. I don't want to die. Hang on. Whoa, no! So we find out now why I'm not a game developer, really. It's kind of cool, though. Look, demo effects. Look at blurs and everything. What? This is amazing! Alright, anyway, yes, I make really awful games. I didn't say they were awful games. I've got loads of these to show you. If you want to come outside afterwards, I'll go through all my crappy JavaScript and show it to you. Oh, look, I'm not even touching the keyboard and I'm still winning. Look, there we go. I'm good at my own games. It's awesome. Yes?
If you just like... So if JavaScript is so terrible, which I buy, what do you think the solution is? You know, is it possible to get a not terrible compile to JS language? Do you think we'll eventually move away from it? What do you think the deal is?
I want to cry at the answer to that question. The answer is no, none of those things are possible. We're just going to have to get faster computers and live with it. That's what's going to happen. In terms of compiled JavaScript language, I've got my eye on pure scripts at the moment. I think it is the answer to all our problems. Maybe. There's a maybe on the end there, because I don't actually know if it will be or not. But it's a decent language at least. It's a good start. It's a lot more like Haskell than anything else, but it's not Haskell because it's built for the web. Yeah, that's my answer to that question. No, there is no solution. We're stuck with JavaScript. I'm sorry. That's where we are. I'm going to rant about it. And it's cathartic. It's cathartic to just release that. Oh God, have you seen the latest ECMAScript proposals with object.createFreeze and oh no, everything about that is just everything all kind of wrong. Never mind, just ignore that. Don't get me started, please. I haven't got beer in my hand. It's too early in the morning for this. If someone gets me a beer right now, we can talk about it. We can talk about it. Developer to developer, we can talk about JavaScript. And 5 pints later, we'll find the problem. We'll find the solution. We'll just forget about it tomorrow morning. Anyone else? For anyone else? Cool. Then I'll be outside writing Erlang because it's not JavaScript.